So that's a wrap, guys. That was a great. No, wait, no, shit, I got that backwards. So, but the nice thing about these, what I was saying is, no matter how good it is or awful it is, I think it'll be pretty good. We'll only get better. You know, the more you do anything, you're going to get better at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're already getting better because the three of us have been meeting for a while now. Has it been a year? Has it been 8 months? It's been a while.
I'm gonna say July. I feel
something like that of 2023, and it's now February 2024. So we've been chatting for a while.
When is 8 months a year? That's
I don't know.
A full 8 months.
Time is a weird thing after post-COVID. Who knows what time is anymore? But we've been meeting and we've been talking about NLP and hypnosis, and we had originally started because we thought, well, you know, each of us has a significant background in NLP and hypnosis, and we wanted to talk about what's the future of this whole field like, what's interesting to us, and what doesn't work about the field of NLP and hypnosis and all that. And we've been having some interesting conversations, but there was some talk of maybe other people would like to, listen in on these conversations. Who knows? Maybe they wouldn't, but we're here, we're experimenting with it. Somebody in the world probably would find our geeky conversations interesting, besides just the three of us.
We've had lots of conversations, and unfortunately, there's no way to go back in time.
Sad.
All the good. It's like that
memory.
It's like that Tenacious D song, tribute. Like, this is not the actual best song. This is a tribute to our great conversations.
Yeah,
like three people must have gotten that joke that aren't on this call. So that's from aiming the bar now. It's pretty low.
There you go. Well, I, for one, am not going to try to recreate any of the gold that we've already spoken with each other. I think it's just have the conversations again.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so I thought we might start with, a fresh take from today, from February 13th, on what our thoughts are about what is good about these fields of NLP and hypnosis that we've learned so much from, and that we've dedicated so much time to studying and going to trainings, often a lot of money too, to learn this stuff. Speaking for David specifically. And then, what value we've gotten from it, but also where there's room for improvement, or where we think maybe things could go in a different way. Because that was kind of the original intention that we were having for meeting. And I think there's probably some fresh things we could come up with now, having talked for 8 months or so. So kicking it off, what has been valuable from NLP and hypnosis and these kinds of change work fields that have kept us interested in this stuff for so many years and kept us pursuing more depth of learning in it? What do you think?
You want to go, David?
Why not? For me, it was... That sounded very ominous. For me, it was kind of like learning a superhero or superpower. My background, for anyone who doesn't know me, and I think you guys probably know, but I was a medical librarian, and I was a skeptic to this stuff. I didn't think it was anything, but I had read about it and heard about it, and I thought, well, I'll research it. Long and short of it is, I found a bunch of research backing this is like a legit thing, whatever that means. What I was really fascinated with was hypnosis initially for medical conditions, especially for anesthesia. So if you can control your mind, or I thought of it as control, now I think more working with your mind to be able to achieve something as powerful and useful, frankly, as medical anesthesia. Like, what else could you do? So I went like on a kind of a long sort of a trek to learn as much as I could about it. Anyway, so what I like about it is the ability to use your mind and teach others to use your mind. And again, it was like a superpower. Like, if this is this legit thing, why would you not want to use it? And then I took some classes and someone said, you could do this for money. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. But recently it's become more self-reflective, where it's more about what I can do with myself from my own experience, and then kind of see who and what this resonates with, like who's interested in the things I'm interested in that kind of powerful self-change thing. I guess you can call it spiritual or just kind of self-improvement. That's in it in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I kind of came at it from the other angle. I was so messed up that I was working on myself and trying lots of different things and reading hundreds of self-help books and stumbled upon NLP in particular because I had just studied in college. I studied cognitive science, which means I took philosophy of language, philosophy of mind, linguistics, computer science, just trying to figure out how does the mind work kind of from the outside, looking in. And that was very interesting intellectually, but I was like, but how does this help me with my life? I'm struggling, struggling with, emotions and behaviors and beliefs that I just don't know how to change. And then I came across NLP, and it was like, I actually read The Structure of Magic, Volume 1, probably the geekiest NLP book there is, the first one that came out. And I was like, oh, this makes total sense, because I just took linguistics, and it was all about, deep structure of language and like these language trees, and which we had just studied in college the year before. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. Oh, yeah, applied to therapy or change. And so then I started learning some of the techniques, and I was like, oh, this stuff's really sophisticated, way beyond, leaps and bounds beyond the other stuff I've learned from, self-help books or whatever. And I started to use it on myself, and I was like, this is starting to actually do something for me, whereas other stuff is kind of on the surface, it's like, it didn't really go very deep. And then only later was like, similarly, like, oh, I could make money at this, and started doing coaching for free because I was like, oh, this would be fun. And then and people were like, oh, you should charge money, this is worth something. I'm like, okay, I charge $1. And he's like, no, it's worth more than that. And they'd give me 20. And so I started charging $20, and I'm like, this is way more I'm making per hour than doing other stuff, because I was in my early 20s. And just kind of went from there.
I guess that segues over to me. So I guess I'm a bit of similarities and a bit of complete opposite end. I was kind of encouraged by the owner of a small business that I was working for, and I was dealing with some major self-esteem issues. I was a kid who naturally got straight A's in school, ended up dropping out of university, right, and flunking out. And it was just a lot of anxiety. But then, of course, as someone whose then concept of self-worth was completely academic achievement, dropping out, I didn't necessarily realize, but I had a lot of negative talk that was, getting in the way, preventing me from having conversations with strangers, all that sort of stuff. Anyways, I got a job, and my boss at the time encouraged me to go to Toastmasters. And in Toastmasters, there was a guy who at that time was actually the president of that club, and he spoke magically. Like, it was amazing. When he spoke, he had so much charisma. He held your attention. He knew exactly how to communicate with the entire group and just absolutely mesmerized them. And I asked him, what is it that you're doing? And he just winked at me and said, NLP. And I'm like, what is that? And he never told me.
Jerk.
And it planted a seed that it wouldn't come until many years later that I ended up taking an NLP training. And it was a weekend workshop, kind of like an introduction to NLP. And by then I have already sort of, Toastmasters absolutely did actually help, give me some more competency in myself. But, and I was working in a sales job, and I was a huge Star Wars fan. And this has relevant to the story that in the first weekend, as the trainer is going around asking why everyone's there, my answer was, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I think that this is the closest I'm ever going to come to be able to use the Force. And I wasn't wrong. I didn't realize how right I was at that time. I meant it as a joke, but I didn't realize how right I was at the time. And by the time that I was sort of, a year into this, my entire life changed. And I think the biggest thing that I got from NLP was, one, it was the awareness of everything that I have been doing that's actually been keeping me stuck. And two, techniques that I can actually implement to create the changes that I want. Right. And I think, and that actually reflects in very much in my coaching model as well, because, I can lead people through experiences and through processes, but the way I approach my work now is I help people understand that how they're kind of at the cause of their own issues. No one, not consciously, not on purpose, of course, but that's definitely part of the equation. So that's what it was, and I've been on this journey about as long as you guys. We've sort of shared this information, but I got involved. I think my first exposure to NLP was 2005. But I didn't get formally trained until 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
So going on 13, 14 plus 15 years, depending.
Yeah. So obviously NLP has been NLP and hypnosis, which I consider sort of overlapping fields, have been, useful tools for the three of us in many ways. They do give you superpowers, I think, in a way. I mean, they're just powers that we all have, but we don't know that we have. The power of the mind, the power to influence and communicate effectively. It sort of builds on those things. But yeah, for me, it was really helpful to have the explicit step-by-step instruction of like, here's what you do, not just like, oh, this person does this amazing thing. Good luck copying them. Maybe they just have natural talent, and you're shit out of luck. It's more like, oh, there's a structure to this. There's a formula to this. There's step-by-step instructions for this. And it took me a long time to realize, until later when I realized, oh, I've been autistic my whole life. Step-by-step instructions have been very helpful for me, making things explicit. That's often been very, very helpful for me to understand how to do something. And so it was a good fit for just how my brain worked anyway. And I really liked that it overlapped with cognitive science, that there was this practical application of, linguistics and how the brain works and this stuff that, in all of my classes, we never were taught how to use any of this stuff for, in daily life. You understand linguistics, so what? It's just, very abstract. But if you could understand linguistics in a way where you could be like, oh, I can see what's missing from my map of reality or somebody else's map of reality, and we can go into the details there and fill that out. And then, oh, that changes how you feel and what you believe. And, and these sorts of things were very helpful for me. And then there's just so many different tools that have and techniques that have proliferated from hypnosis and NLP. Like, sometimes I say like, like most people don't know a single technique for making any changes to themselves, to their unconscious feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. But if you go to the annual HypnoThoughts Live conference, you'll see 400 different ones being taught. A lot of those even work. And but there's just like so many things. Once you actually get into a field where people are changing regularly and helping other people to change, it's just like there's so many options for doing that. Whereas, the average person on the street doesn't know anything effective for how they would do that.
Oh, it reminds me of one of the lines, right? I don't know if this was, I think it was Frogs into Princes, again, one of those earlier books. And so I actually didn't read a single NLP book until I was already into the field about 10 years. Oh, wow. Right. This is all 2017, 2018 that I actually started reading the books. But anyways, I think Richard Bandler is saying that his issue when he was a student, studying psychology was, why is it that all the textbooks and all the classes are all about, everything that he's learning or therapy seem to be why people have problems and what are we going to call those problems, the labels, the diagnoses. And he was more interested in, well, why don't we go and interview or ask the people who actually created change, right? And I think it's important that, because we're not therapists, often, I joke, and I think this will resonate with both of you guys, that often I do the work of a therapist, right? Because I'm getting similar sort of clients, or as far as, people that want, the outcomes. But while this is not a formal term, in our circles, we call it change work. And I wish actually this becomes a known term, right? That, like, just like you say, I'm going to a dentist appointment or I'm going to a physio appointment. I'm going to a therapy appointment, and that means something. And then, I'm going for a change work appointment, right? I think, or a change work session, right? I think that would be really cool because that's what this is focused on. It's actually creating change, and that's what NLP has always been focused on.
Yeah, creating change. Go ahead, David.
I think that's part of why I kind of fought the term coaching. Now I kind of like it because having taken like coaching classes for weightlifting, for instance, on one hand, it's intuitive. You pick up a weight and lift it over your head or whatever you do with it. On the other hand, there's some things that are much more complicated. If you don't do it right, you might end up with weight crashing down on you or something. There's certain things in life that are more intuitive than others, and there's certain things that, without some experience and some road rash, so to speak, it's not going to. There's a learning curve to certain things in life, and there's certain things that we've learned and ingrained bad behavior. And I think there's a difference between therapy as far as like things that are diagnostic and things that are not diagnostic, or things that maybe they're seeing someone for things that are licensed based. And we do things that aren't. Typically, we do things that aren't for like those kind of issues. There's some crossover. I'll admit that.
Sure.
But yeah, I think coaching is kind of a nice term. Change work, I think, captures it pretty well.
Yeah, both of those, change work seems to be more focused, right, on like the protocols, because coaching is seems conscious, right? Whereas some of the is it? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of what we're doing in NLP at Hypnosis, for the listener who's like, what the hell are they talking about? Is we're working at the unconscious level, the level of what we call unconscious mind or subconscious mind hypnosis. What is that? Well, it's like you have a conscious mind, you have an unconscious mind. Your conscious mind is what you're aware of at any given moment, your thoughts, your senses, etc. And your unconscious mind is everything else, which is most of your experience. Now, a lot of your subconscious or unconscious mind you can become aware of. You can, notice things that you haven't noticed before that are going on in your experience. You can go into a relaxed trance state, or some other kind of trance state. But often we do a relaxed trance states in hypnosis, and you can become more aware of your beliefs and feelings in your body and inner pictures and so on that maybe you're not consciously aware of. And then there's other stuff that you can't even be aware of at the unconscious level. Like, how do you continue to beat your heart while you go around your day? How do you continue to breathe while you're sleeping at night? That's not something you do consciously on any level. And it's not something you can become totally conscious of how you do that, but your body just does that. And it's still you doing that. It's, it's not somebody else doing it to you. And so, but there are even bodily processes we can affect through the power of the mind, through imagination, through communicating with parts of yourself that seems totally made up until you experience it and you play around with it and you're like, oh crap, I affected that thing that seemed very bodily, like a headache or like digestive processes. There's protocols in hypnosis for irritable bowel syndrome and things like that seem like, well, that's not controllable. I mean, it's run by the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic, like automatic. It's not really in your conscious control. But with visualization exercises, we can have some influence, not necessarily control, but influence over these automatic things. And I think this is something that I run across a lot with people outside of our field. They don't believe you can do anything about that stuff. Often these people are, therapists or professionals of their field. They're just like, best you can do is cope with it. I'm like, really? There's hundreds or thousands of hypnotists who are teaching protocols on how to do something better than just cope with it.
It's a life sentence.
Right. Yeah. Emotions too. A lot of people, I think almost everybody thinks emotions can't do anything. They just happen. You just feel that way. The external world makes me feel that way, nothing I can do. It's like, yeah, there's many, many different ways to change your automatic feelings. Not that we have conscious control in the moment every single time or something like that. It's not like that. But we can train that. We can reshape that behavior. Just like, in Psych 101, I learned Pavlov trained dogs to drool on command. something no dog trainer had ever thought to do before, only because he was studying digestion. But he figured out how to create this automatic process in dogs that the dogs didn't know how they were doing it. The researcher didn't know how they were doing it. But by linking up a bell with food over and over, or whatever signal it was, he was able to get the dogs to drool by hearing the bell. Similarly, we don't have to necessarily revisit our whole childhoods and challenge all of our limiting beliefs. We can do these kinds of things, but the dogs didn't do that, and they still had a new behavior automatic. And so oftentimes we can bypass all of that stuff, or at least, do that afterwards. Get the change first and do that conscious mind stuff after if you want. We can do it in that direction if we so choose with some of the tools from NLP and hypnosis.
I'm imagining Freud doing free association with like a dog on a couch. And
exactly, right?
Tell me how you feel about that.
Tell me about your mother. How did it feel when you were ripped from the litter? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Duff, as you're speaking and sharing all of that, where my mind was going is one of the things that I guess I liked about NLP and just learning it. And one, I think it's mostly because it's conducive of me just as a former personality, right? And we know, like David, for example, David's the researcher, right? And he's the academic. Well, for me, I've always been sort of like hands-on. And, a lot of NLP, going back, I mean, this was the 70s, right? It was like we didn't know what we know today in neuroscience back then. This was like, there's a lot of stuff in NLP that can actually now be proven by what we know from neuroscience. Well, we didn't have that back then, but what they had actually developed was just this first very sharp ability to pay attention, right? And in NLP we call it sensory acuity, but to really hear more, see more, feel more, and they're always just paying attention. And just from that, it was just like, okay, what works, right? And it was always just a model, but they really paid attention. They tested and they see what got results and what didn't get results. And that I really like. It gives me that sort of flexibility. And I say, as much as NLP is such a big part of my life, by following the model of NLP, the moment something doesn't work, I drop it, right? If NLP stops working as a whole, I drop it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny because there are people from outside the field of NLP who have criticized it for years for various reasons, some of them good, some of them not so good. Some of the early founders of NLP made ginormous claims about what it could and couldn't do. And also badmouth psychiatry and therapy and so on. And so it created this antagonistic relationship.
What's that? Wasn't a smart thing to do, was it?
That was a terrible thing to do.
Yeah,
it created a negative PR backlash to this day continues. And some of those people are are sort of in the skeptic community, which I feel like I'm part of as well. And anyone who's interested in science, like skepticism is half of science. It's like testing rigorously your hypotheses. But some skeptics take it more of as an ideological thing, and once something gets put in the category of pseudoscience, it's just there forever, even if there's new evidence that arises, which is not itself skeptical of your own hypotheses. So some people think NLP is garbage, but hypnosis is good. And that's always interesting to me because there's a massive overlap between the two. Yeah. And ultimately, to me, it's about what works. If you try something and it works for you, well, that worked for you. You don't need a study to prove it, right? And if it
speak for yourself.
But if I try it and the same thing doesn't work for Mohammed or David, it doesn't work for Mohammed or David. Like that's just truth, right? Yeah.
Is this true? Someone told me I didn't. It's not in any of the books that I've read, but apparently Bandler in one of his books, or maybe he said it in a workshop that this person attended. But like they created NLP so therapists would use hypnosis.
That sounds like something you'd say. I can't cite it or quote it where that might be from, but that
sounds like something he would say, sure. But it sounds like something he would say after the fact, and probably not when they were creating NLP. I don't think that was the intention because they didn't even meet Erickson until much later.
Well, they did modeled Erickson and a bunch of other people. One of the things I heard was the 6-step reframe they called it NLP, and this may be, there's probably someone who could debunk this if it's not entirely accurate, but my understanding is, in part, they started using NLP, like say, knew about Erickson at this point when they made the 6-step reframe or N-step reframe for you new folks, but basically did that, and they called it NLP because they couldn't legally do hypnosis in California, but there are hypnotic elements within that process, and that.
Yeah.
My understanding is that's true. There might be someone who would say you're full of it, Dave, but that made sense to me because there are certain things in NLP processes that seem like they're hypnosis. They're not using a formal induction and formal trance, but there's certain pieces that seem damn close to what a hypnotic session would be like. You're just using different words and framings, perhaps.
Yeah. Totally. It all gets blurry when you get into the details. What's hypnosis? Yeah. What's NLP? Ask 100 hypnotists and you get 100 answers.
Yeah, at least.
But yeah, the way I think about this stuff is using the power of imagination or the mind to create change. And this, in some ways, gets into some of the downsides of hypnosis and NLP. Actually, what a segue right there. In that you can kind of create any kind of change you want. So if someone, say, lacks a moral compass and learns all of the NLP and hypnosis tools,
you mean
might
like
decide, well, the outcome I want to create is to get people to give me their money or to, otherwise do what I want, and who cares what they want. So, and you do have people like this in the NLP and hypnosis community. There's some percentage of people in every community like this, by the way. Yes, there's some percentage of Catholic priests or Boy Scout leaders or therapists or doctors or lawyers who don't care that much about other humans because there's just a bell curve of moral development, right? And so when you get people on the low end of that moral development bell curve who learn powerful psychological techniques, whether they're NLP, hypnosis, or anything else, you can get some nasty results. And that's not so great.
I didn't even know that the dark side, if you will, of NLP actually existed in the beginning. But what I do remember is when I was very new and just learning and I had signed up for like the proper training, I had shared, this with one of my buddies. And his response was like, why are you learning to manipulate people? Right. And I'm like, what? I was completely confused. But then, as I learned, like the pickup artist community, for example, right. Right. Which I actually did finally end up reading the book, The Game, I think in 2018, I want to say, or maybe 19, like so much later. And it was a very interesting and sort of disturbing read at the same time. But yeah, that's my biggest, I think my biggest gripe is just how you have this amazing body of knowledge, but we're not going to get in trouble for slander, are we? Because I'm about to say the co-creators of NLP,
let's just say there are some people who made some things. Yeah. Let's just say that.
Yeah, especially because they've kind of been known to do this, right? Haven't they?
Yes.
Legally go after folks. So, yeah.
Some people did some things that we'll keep vague that were not good, but yeah, from the beginning. And so that is part of the legacy and history of this field. Now, the funny thing is then people will equate NLP with manipulation or mind control or something like that. And same with hypnosis. People have this idea that hypnosis is mind control, to which I always say to clients if they bring that up, man, I wish, then my job would be so easy. And they laugh. But it's not that per se, but there are manipulative people in the world. Some of those manipulative people learn hypnosis and NLP. Some just learn regular old psychology and then go on to become marketers and advertisers. And that's a lot of what our world has become. Some learn chemistry and learn to cook meth and make pipe bombs. Like, we still teach chemistry to high schoolers, even though you can make meth and pipe bombs with high school knowledge of chemistry. So it's not necessarily the information that leads people to do bad things. It's what we choose to do with it. At the same time, we could train people to do things with a kind of ethical compass in mind, like we could emphasize that rather than just emphasizing do whatever you want or, whatever. David.
I have a story. This is a good story, so I won't get sued for it. But John Overdorf, who is a great trainer, I think you both heard me rattle off about him. But he talked about how I think he and his then wife, Julie Silverthorne, said that if you could, in an ethical way, if you could make people do anything you wanted with hypnosis, they said, well, we would go to a prison and reform everybody.
Right.
And there you go.
Totally,
nothing unethical about that. You would reform them, make their lives better, get rid of repeat criminals. And if someone thinks they can just hypnotize people to do whatever they want to, I would challenge you to do that. Go to a homeless shelter and rehabilitate the homeless. Go to a prison, rehabilitate people who are repeat offenders whose lives could benefit from you. So it's not that easy. I think you can make powerful changes, and if you want to manipulate people, you can do that with hypnosis. You can do it without it. There are enough cult leaders in history and people who have been cult personality type figures. So that's possible. But if you could just say change and fill in the blank, then someone would be, we'd all be millionaires. And if people that are millionaires that think they can do that, I would challenge you. Like, go to a prison system, go to a mental hospital and do it there. Prove it to me. Show me.
Right. The easiest way to manipulate someone is just to lie.
Frame. I've never heard it from that angle. That's a really good frame, David.
I like that frame. Yeah, and I always say the easiest way to manipulate people is just to lie. Any 2-year-old or 3-year-old can do that. Like, it's quite a few manipulative toddlers, and there's quite a few manipulative people who are dumb as rocks. They just tell a lie, and people believe them. And so you don't have to know any sophisticated. I mean, I like David. I was going to say specifically, no. No, I mean, so you don't need sophisticated psychological techniques to manipulate people. You just need a lack of an ethical compass or the lack of ability to empathize with your victim. But for the funny thing is the same tools can be used for incredibly good things. And so you see people in the NLP field, like the Andreases who I've worked for many years. Steve Andreas has passed away, but amazing guy, and Connie Ray, who I continue to do marketing for, who are just amazing human beings. Like, they took this stuff and they're like, hey, how do we do good? Exactly like David's example with John Overdorf. Like, hey, how do we help people really, really effectively with this stuff? And they created techniques first for healing from various things, very sort of therapeutic things, like for grief and for trauma and stuff that's really effective. Some of which has been well studied now, like the RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories technique, which has taken people with PTSD from war and crazy stuff, and in just like 1 to 3 sessions, just resolved their traumatic flashbacks, which is outrageous.
Yeah.
So you take these powerful tools with a good heart, with a kind heart, and it's like an amplifier. Just amplifies whatever your intention is. When you have powerful techniques, and now, of course, the Andreases have created core transformation and wholeness work, which are these amazing techniques for healing and finding wholeness and spirituality, even. So, I think this is actually a bigger issue just for all of humanity. Like, we're developing these incredible technologies like AI now and robotics and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, we can bring along the AI apocalypse pretty soon if we want, or maybe we could make a much better world for everybody. I don't know, with the same tool, it's possible.
So here's a question for you then. Should it be a thing or incumbent on an NLP trainer? Like, I have my answer, right? But to also teach an ethical framework along with these tools, right? I mean, my answer is, all of my trainings, I even say, if you want to take an NLP training with me, my unique proposition is that I'm more interested in building better humans right? How to teach you how to have, better relationship with your significant others, how to be a better citizen, how to be a better family person, how to love deeply, how to enjoy the moment, like that. That's actually what I'm interested in. NLP is just a vehicle, right? But then we have so many, and it's like, like we almost are like, the acceptable answer is supposed to be, I just teach the stuff. You do what you want. But I think we're at a point where that's gotten us in trouble, and we're living in a world that, well, that reflects that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, go ahead, David.
If you take hunter safety, or you learn to drive a car or how to use a bandsaw, there's a safety component. There's the assumption you're not going to like go take a car and go, drive on the sidewalks. I'm serious. And if you're a doctor, one of the first things you learn is do no harm. Allegedly, I'm not a doctor, but that's part of their standard curriculum. I think I think we should be teaching an ethical component. I mean, it seems like it should go without saying, and yet there are people that are like, can I use it for nefarious means? Like, well, don't,
Don't.
Right. Like, but I'll give two answers. One, don't. Second is if you have to trick someone into giving you what you want, how pathetic is that? Seriously, if you want to meet women or guys, or if you want to make money, work on yourself, be the kind of person who draws people you want to be with, who is able to effectively be in a part of society that people want to give you money for things you can do that are of value. Don't just make some parlor trick that makes someone want to sleep with you. That always seemed really, really pathetic. That's me judging a bit here.
Well, I mean, I think it's driven, in the pickup artist thing specifically, is driven by a deep sense of unworthiness to be loved. If I was just myself, no one would love me or want to sleep with me. Therefore, I need all these tricks to pretend to be somebody I'm not so that I can get this need met. Wow, that's driving the whole thing. That's the whole story. The funny thing is, you can use these same tools from NLP to heal that wound.
Yeah.
And then you could just show up as yourself and have your needs met and connect authentically with another human being and be loved and give love. Wow, that would be infinitely better. Trust me, it is, because that's what I'm doing in my own marriage. It's fantastic. I recommend it. And, I didn't have to trick her into bed. None of that happened, thankfully. Jeez. And there's, ongoing growth that's possible for all of us. We all have these things driving the show. Our insecurities. I'm not completely free from insecurities either. I'm a human being. So I think if we have this orientation, towards ethics, towards, ethics and healing too, like actually trying to heal what's going on inside, these strategies. That's one way of putting it. We have these strategies to meet our needs. And a lot of these strategies are not very effective. Sometimes they harm other people. Sometimes they just harm ourselves. Sometimes they do both. But man, that's just not how we have to live. It's just how we think, best solution we came up with at an unconscious level in the past. But we can redo all of that. We can reprogram or learn a new way to get our needs met. The method core transformation I mentioned before is one of the most excellent ones at that, in that it really gets to like, we have this deep need to just be. And when we step into this state of beingness, we're already whole and complete. There's nothing we need to do. We don't need to do these weird things to try to get this and that and the other. We can just kind of be direct and present and simple and authentic. And man, life just gets way better after that. So in some sense, there's teaching ethics, and there's the other question I have is, like, how do you actually teach ethics? Because I took 7 ethics classes in college. I took more classes in ethics than any other subject. And what it ended up turning me into was like Chidi from The Good Place, which is this like super anxious character that's like, oh no, I'm doing something wrong all the time. How do you do the right thing? And just paralyzed with decisions. So I think actually how you teach ethics is you teach people to be whole. You teach the orientation towards self and other. That's like, basically you start with kindness and then you learn from there and you go from there, rather than starting with like, pushing and forcing and manipulating to try to get your need or want met. So I think that's the deeper way to teach ethics too, is not just here's a list of rules you need to follow, or do this, don't do that. At some level we can do that. That's teaching the conscious mind, but the unconscious mind's still like, okay, sure, but I'm not going to get my needs met unless I manipulate people, or unless I hurt myself, or whatever it is. So yeah, to really make good people, I think we need something deeper too. We need to actually do the inner work, and heal from our shit.
I think core transformation and other philosophies. I'm reading a Stanislav Grof book, which talks about this to some extent. Essentially, the whole premise that every behavior has some underlying reason or some positive intention, depending on how you look at it. That's a tenet of NLP. So if we look at what that behavior's need is, if we satisfy that, that's like kind of the core transformation model. Connie Ray would probably like say that's overly simplified and she'd be right, but you give that part what it wants. Well, how does that shape the behavior? That way, it's from a place of wholeness, a place of resources, not a place of like I'm desperate to get whatever it is. You give them, if you give yourself or a client something where it's not a place of need, it's a place of they can be satiated. And then from that place, what you actually want from there. And you don't need it when it's not like from some desperation or needy place. What's your next step then? Then it's a much more positive answer. Almost, right. It almost can't not be, so to speak.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm going to rewind a bit and just to connect this point that, Duff, when you were talking about how you'll have people that feel like they have to trick, women into bed, for example, right?
What's people to buy from you in a sales context, yeah.
Or sales, sorry, yeah, right. I was remembering what David said. But they have to be manipulative to, I guess, achieve their end goal. That's coming from a place of, basically there's holes in the heart, right? And there's needs that are not being met, and you could exploit, right? You could exploit, right? But that just makes the situation. But if you actually have compassion and you actually have empathy, right, and you get into the heart, and it's one of my lines that I genuinely believe human beings are the best when we're leading through the heart, right? But when we actually fill those needs, right, then it's amazing what that allows the person to allows them to just be, right? And now getting to this point where, I've kind of been, obviously been doing this for a while now. I was just like you guys, and what I observe in our society is that, like, people yell, people fight, people do all of these things, people lie, and what's behind that behavior, what's behind that connection is a cry for help in some way. There's some sort of a hole, there's some sort of a need, right? But what we do is, just give you an example, just so so it's clear, and it's okay that I'm talking about this. My mother, she has a thing where when it's our birthdays, right, she's like, well, this really should be called Mother's Day because I gave birth to you, right? So if anyone's being celebrated, it should be me, right?
That's funny.
And this pisses off. It completely annoys one of my siblings, right? But I because of the work that we've all done, right, I'm able to go beyond, like, what's behind that communication, and really see that this is my mom asking for love, right? And so if I just give her that love, right, guess what? I have an amazing birthday, right?
Yeah.
And this is, but what we do in our society is someone is actually asking for something, and it's almost like we do our best for them not to get that. Why should you have love when I don't have love, right? And that's this constant sort of like this pattern that just doesn't work, and it just it's a cycle that kind of keeps on going. But if we really do just fulfill and give, and I think that's important because there was a time where I needed to have the spotlight, right? Like I needed it to be me, right? Because there was a lot of holes where I didn't get that. right? And having had the spotlight in a good way, in a healthy way where I'm helping other people, but the spotlight's there. This has allowed me to be filled, and I actually have found myself in the recent years. I'm actually spending more of my time helping other people now get their spotlight, right? Like that actually is more fulfilling for me. If I get the spotlight, okay, hey, that's great. I got to show up. I got to do the thing, I'll do it, right? But there's that thing because now I'm full, right? So I think there's definitely something here where if we have that compassion and we really pay attention, we can do some amazing work as far as growing humanity goes.
Yeah. To me, this really ties into like, where do I see the future of hypnosis and NLP going?
Yeah.
I think at first when we were having conversations, and I think what most people would say is like, oh, these techniques and developing better techniques. And I'm like, to me, the techniques are already amazing. Like we already have such amazing tools and techniques. The world doesn't know that they exist, but like we have these amazing tools and techniques.
Yeah.
So it's not about techniques. It's about heart. It's about adding in the care and going in the right direction with the techniques. Same with human technology in general. Like, geez, we have such amazing technology. We could feed the world today. We could stop all war today. Like it's not complicated.
We could blow each other up and
or
get money
we
and
could make more bombs and blow things up. Yes, exactly. And a lot of times that's what our governments are choosing to do with our technology, with the support of people, because people are in this level of consciousness where they're like, how else do you solve problems except by killing? But that's of course very short-sighted and creates more problems down the road, on and on. Yeah. But it's not a lack of know-how. It's not a lack of technology anymore. I mean, obviously it is for a lot of people. Like lots of people who don't know there's techniques to transform their suffering and change their behaviors they want to change and so on. So we can still teach them that from hypnosis and NLP. But I think the future is really like, what should we do? Like what's good to do? What would make things far better rather than just for me, but for in a win-win way for everyone? And that's why I think we bring in the heart and care for more and more beings and moral development, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's actually where a lot of people in the NLP field have been going, like Connie Andreas, like and not just her, but like Richard Bolstad in New Zealand has been doing more and more stuff with even just collective healing now with groups of people. And he developed a bunch of spiritual techniques as well that are all about healing. And Robert Dilts has come up with some healing spiritual stuff. And anyway, lots of folks doing this. So it's not just one or two people. But the people have, in my opinion, the heart, the care, have taken these NLP techniques. At first, they were just kind of tinkering around, doing anything. And now they're like, well, let's definitely go in this healing direction with these. So that to me is the future of NLP and hypnosis is really making that explicit, is not going, hey, this is chemistry. Feel free to make bombs or purify water and life-saving drugs, like whatever you want. Like it's up to you. I don't care. But to say, no, like, please don't make drugs and bombs. We don't need any more. Or no, please don't make illegal, deadly drugs and bombs. Please make life-saving drugs and purify water, because that's what we need, and that would be good. It would be good for you and everybody else.
I have a thought that I think is kind of a parallel with that. I tend to think of it as the art and science of hypnosis and NLP. And I think having a good heart will direct that in a positive way. I think like art can be used in a myriad of ways as well. But I think if hypnosis and NLP I think hypnosis more than NLP tends to have more science backing it, just based on the field. And there is a science as far as how language is structured. When I was my first career was English teacher, so I actually studied my senior year. I studied a class in structure of language, and it was very in depth and very tedious, frankly. But you can phrase words in different languages in different ways to have different meanings, a lot of different effects. You read a great poem, a great play, a great script, like a movie script, and those words can mean things, and they can have an impact, a powerful impact. Shakespeare to this day will move people to tears and laughter or befuddlement if you don't really read Shakespeare. It can be dense. But a great poem or a great book can move people to tears, to violence, to spirituality. And there is a certain science behind that, but there's also a lot of art as far as how words can be phrased. Different people respond to different things. And that's where I think there's an art with hypnosis and NLP. There are scripts and techniques. I'm not going to bash those, but there's also an art to what the person in front of you, how they're responding or not responding, frankly. Like if you're at a party and talking to someone, I'm old and don't go to parties. If I did, though, and I was having a conversation, if I said some joke or a story and I get like stone face, scratch that one. If it's getting like some positive response, and keep going, you figure out what the person you're interacting with is responding to. And hypnosis and NLP, there is that combination of techniques and words and phrases and structures that have worked. And then you base on what the person you're interacting with, what they're responding to, and what their goals are. You kind of elicit what problem they're there to fix, what they want to get out of life, or working with you, or hang out with you for 5 minutes at an elevator. That's a long elevator ride. But then you kind of have the art of interact with that person. It's not just about a technique or about getting what you want. It's about that art, the art of living, the art of talking to people, of interacting with other human beings. So I think there is that blend. In science, there's a lot of science that shows hypnosis works. And there are some things showing NLP processes work, like core transformation, RTM especially. Then that art of dealing with the person and then blending it to whoever you're with, letting those techniques and structures of language and whatever, letting that become something that's living and breathing, that the person you're talking to, plays a role too. There's a back and forth communication.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, even a lot of the science on hypnosis and NLP is about this highly scripted stuff, because that's the thing that's easy to repeat. But yeah, the art is so personalized, you can't really easily test it. So, but it's definitely there.
I was saying, I think definitely an element, something I used to say, this is back from my Toastmasters day, but it's like, when you speak from the tongue, it only reaches the ears, but when you speak from the heart, right, it'll reach the other's heart as well, right? And that's where I think that's part of the science, right? And that's part of what makes it work.
Yeah, like mirror neurons, for instance. Like if you have rapport with someone and you're having communication and they're responding to you, if you're being sincere and speaking from the heart and they have rapport, they might feel that same way or have similar sort of impact. So there's science saying why that might work. There's art with how you communicate with people. Like there's no scientific formula for a hit song. Well, I mean, I suppose have you
ever seen the YouTube video, The Four Chords?
Yeah, that's why I had to stop myself. But but then there's Beethoven, there's the Beatles, right? There are things that, if for like pop music, like there are things that are very, very repetitive and very redundant, derivative of is what I was looking for. But then there are songs and there are pieces of art and prose that are they don't fit that same, chord progression, those same 4 chords.
Totally.
And they work for ways that you can figure it out. Like there are structures, but there's something artistic that's beyond just here's your chord progression and this, 4/4 timing and go. There's more to it.
100%. Yeah, I mean, this is where my coaching's really gone the last few years, inspired by John Overdurf's lineage. I didn't train with him, but I trained with Jess Marion, Sean Carson, Sarah Carson, great trainers in the HNLP lineage. And their training was all about just being creative and spontaneous. And that was great because I was kind of going in that direction a little. Like for many years, I'd been like formula, autistic steps. What are the steps? And that was very much how my mind worked until I got that satisfaction of like, oh, I know what I'm doing because I can follow the steps and I'm getting results. I'm seeing the results. But then I was like, okay, but I want to improvise more. I want to be more like jazz and less like classical music. And with my coaching. And so I started improvising and I'm like, I don't know, am I going in a useful direction or not though? And it took me a little while, but that training helped me a lot to kind of get the sense of what are the general principles here of change. Some of it's just rapport. Some of it's, associating into a resource state, dissociating from problem state. But then there's all these other options too And a lot of the options I learned in that training were helpful. And then I started coming up with my own principles, and which I'm working on in my book that I'm writing, The Joy of Doing, which is all about doing things in an easy and enjoyable way, including change work, including inner work, but also outer work. So, getting clear about what are the principles that actually lead in a good direction, both enjoyment, but also what's going to be good for you and the other person. So it's like a win-win kind of thing rather than win-lose. I'm gonna beat you and I'm gonna win and you're gonna suffer, or lose-win. I'm gonna sacrifice and be the martyr and it's okay. I don't have any needs. So like figuring out like if we have a general sense of the principles of what we're doing, then we can improvise, then we can design custom solutions on the fly, then we can be more artistic, and not autistic, but artistic, and flow with it more in the moment. And that's just a much more enjoyable way to live too, than having to have this rigidity and these rules and these, I must follow the procedure, we're going off script, kind of like anxiety, which really was what it was for me. It's like, fear of going off script into the unknown. If you figured out how to, go through the wilderness and survive, you can go to a new place in the wilderness every time. You don't have to always go on the straight and narrow path.
You follow the yellow brick road.
You can follow the yellow brick road. Right. And then you can find David behind the black curtain there. And all is well.
What a strange pivot. I share some blame.
Why not though? Yeah. David is our wizard, I think. The wizard of hypnosis.
So
anything else anyone wants to say, or should we wrap up here?
Long awkward pause.
Awkward pause.
Way, right?
No, I thought that's good. Good kind of place to pivot. No, I thought it was a good conversation. I mean, because we kind of all said what we get out of hypnosis and NLP and kind of what it is to us, and none of us are going to get sued for this, which is always that's a highlight.
I don't think any lawsuits will come out of this episode, so that's
not
that's a real pro. That's a real pro.
Yeah,
if I tell my wife we're getting sued, this is going to be a short-lived.
This podcast might not last very long. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, what podcast?
Right.
What podcast? Yeah, I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any parting thoughts from anyone about this conversation?
I think there's an evolution that's happening of human thinking. I think there's also groups being formed, and there's a separation happening as well. There are people definitely doubling down and are becoming quite purposefully and consciously, they're becoming less human. Right. That being said, I am hearing more and more and just people getting back to their hearts, caring more, understanding the importance of actually getting together, of limiting their focus. I mean, technology is fantastic. Look at this. This wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for technology.
Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, it's, there's so many of us that don't even know our neighbors' names. Right. So how do you build a community if you don't even know that? Right. So there's a lot of, I think, the good stuff of old world thinking starting to come back up, and we're starting to become more connected, more compassionate. So there's definitely an evolution that's happening.
Yeah. I'm going to dovetail off of that. Yeah, I think the evolution that's happening is broader than just the NLP and hypnosis world.
Yeah.
I think it's happening in our little corner of the world in terms of we have this technology, really. It's not computer technology, but it's techniques that we can use to do things. And people are waking up to the fact that they don't want everyone to be empowered to do everything, because some of those things are harmful to themselves or others. And some of those things are very much the opposite, or very healing or empowering and loving for themselves and others. And, more people are being like, let's do more of that. And I agree. Some of the, people are also polarizing. And there are people who are like, no, let's dominate and control people harder and punish people more. And but I think as those things polarize, it's going to become more obvious of a choice.
More obvious. This is a tipping point. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like the pickup artist thing, for instance, was very underground. There's a small percentage of people doing that online. Back in Usenet, apparently. Talk about technology. It's like alt.seduction or something. Ross
Very
Jeffries
subtle,
was on there. Yeah. Very subtle. And then it became like these internet forums. And then the game came out and became like a best-selling book, saying men are learning these techniques to manipulate women. And now, man, young people seem like they have it really bad because of dating apps and all this stuff. But
like a Michael Keaton movie or something there.
Who knows? Yeah. But anyway, so like things are polarizing, but I think when things polarize, the choice is more obvious.
Yeah.
When before it was like, we can do whatever. And, and the choice, I think, is really between like, are we going to be committed to healing and care for everybody, including the people who are stuck in manipulation and power and control and so on? Or are we going to try to like, force people to do what we want, including ourselves, and, create inner conflict and harm ourselves and others in the process, create all these side effects? And hopefully we'll make the right choice, but we always have a choice. We can make the wrong choice if we want, as long as we want. But I hope more people are waking up to making more useful choices that really get what we want, really meet the need, really get that sense of fulfillment.
I have a quick thought, and then I'll pipe down. But we have more power technologically. We have, I don't have a phone on me, but we have essentially more power in a cell phone than they used allegedly to launch their first rockets into space.
Yep.
Unless you don't think that we had rockets in space, then God. Anyway, but
Flat
there's
Earth.
someone, right? Who am I going to offend? But we have so much technology, so much information, and we can I'm a big fact checker. I love fact checking because if I'm wrong, I want to know it so I can find out. But we have so much ability to learn and find stuff out medically, scientifically. We have techniques we can learn. Anyone watching this, dozens of us, hopefully, but not Arrested Development joke. But you have so much ability to learn to do things for yourself and for others, to learn and experience so much. I think we're at a point we can kind of take a step back from people that are trying to influence us for their own gains, and from social media, I think is big in that. We have the ability to go and look and see what can we do to help ourselves and help others. What can we learn that'll make a difference in our lives and in the world, and start to use it for some positive change. And that's what I'd like to see us do. I think hypnosis and NLP are great tools for us to use for ourselves and to impact and improve, frankly, the lives of the world. You can get pretty lofty if you think about it, what you could do to help people, just to make the world a better place. We could make this more utopic than probably ever, in human history. So there's a lot of potential, a lot of good potential, and hopefully we can do something with that.
Yeah.
To boldly go.
Wow, that was
Where no person has gone before. No one has gone before. That's the original Star Trek was no man, but that was a little sexist. And then Star Trek Next Generation was no one has gone before. That was better.
Yeah. And that was when we started this conversation, to wrap this up, put a nice bow on it, is the name To Totally Boldly Go is, I grew up watching Star Trek, and to me, that is, they figured it out. They figured a lot of things out, right? Where we
like
are
iPads.
using... Yes. Where we're using
this
our
was
minds
basically
and our
invented in
hearts
Next
and
Generation
intellect
right there.
For ultimate good, right? So, yeah.
Not just iPads, but a cashless society.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Next episode, we'll talk about Strange New Worlds and why I think it's the best Star Trek show.
I'll have to research for that one.
Right. And this podcast ended before it started.
Sponsored by.
Well, it was a nice run, guys.
Nice run. That was good. Okay. Thanks everybody for listening, and bye-bye.